deer, this is your food, you're always going to get the unintended visitors, which could be a skunk, which could be a coyote, or, which could be a raccoon. So, your best bet is to just leave it be and let nature be nature. Once you start feeding that animal, then it becomes dependent on you. You may think that it's a great idea to have, Bambi come through your yard and, feed in your yard, but your neighbor may not feel the same way. And if your neighbor has a small child and a deer walks up to the child, that obviously could cause some great alarm.
Right, and what people have to realize is all forms of feeding are illegal, which includes incidental feeding, which means if you have a bird feeder out and you're dropping sunflower seeds on the ground from that bird feeder and deer are congregating and eating those sunflower seeds, that's incidental feeding. That's also illegal. I mean, it's probably tougher to enforce, and I don't want to speak from a law enforcement perspective, and it's hard to tell people that you can't have a bird feeder because it's not illegal to feed birds, but if you have deer congregating, it could be considered illegal feeding.
What happens if a person touches a newborn fawn? Is it rejected by the...
I'm sorry I laugh, but it happens all the time. The common thing that we hear is it was abandoned. And what people have to realize is when they find a fawn, for the first couple of weeks of its life, it doesn't have any scent or very little scent, and that's basically to allow it to survive away from the mother and not allow predators to find it. What the mother will do is she will leave it somewhere. And that fawn will choose its own bedding area. She will leave it in a particular area. She'll remember where that area is. And then she will go off and feed because she has to get nutrition to produce milk to be able to feed that fawn. And that fawn will select a suitable area to bed, and it will bed down. And it'll stay there for 5-6 hours. And the mother will come back and feed it when nobody's around. And quite often people see the fawn there, but they don't see the mother and they think it's been abandoned. The mother probably came back and fed it when they didn't see, probably overnight or at some point when people aren't around, when it felt safe, and they just assume that that fawn is abandoned because it's been laying there all day. And what you have to realize is that's their strategy. That's what works best for them because of the fact that that fawn has very little scent and it has those spots which are pretty good camouflage. It will just lay there, and you can walk right up to it in its first week of life and pick it right up. It won't run away. It doesn't have that flight response yet, so people just assume that it's been abandoned. I picked it up, and then they call us and they say I need to bring it to a rehabber, or very often they keep it as a pet. And that creates some bad consequences as well. Anytime deer are habitualized to people, when that deer grows up, you have problems that occur. They'll fight with people thinking that it's another deer because they were raised by people. So we prefer that they don't pick them up. They can call us. We'll give them a number of a rehabber that they can bring it to, but we prefer they would just let them be.
James, you want to mention?
Yeah, we receive numerous calls every season for fawns that have been abandoned, and it's typically not the case, and the best intentions usually harm the animal. I'm not going to get into what the animal should be fed and shouldn't be fed, but a lot of times people will just go in the fridge and give the deer milk, give the fawn milk, which is actually harmful to the fawn. So the best intentions lead to sometimes the death of the animal. Again, nature is nature, and it's best left alone. And if there is a serious issue, you can always call your local police department, call the state agencies, and everybody will point you in the right direction, rather than just taking it in your own hands to take care of the animal.
Because you mentioned that the mother will feed the fawn. What does the mother feed it with? Berries?
Milk.
Milk?
They're mammals. Yep. All the mammals nurse their young with milk.
Yep.
That's what makes a mammal.
Yeah, one of those things that makes a mammal is the fact that they have mammary glands and they lactate. Yeah, so they'll nurse it.
But you mentioned if you feed a fawn with regular milk, that will kill it?
I don't know about killing it, but it will.
Cow milk and deer milk actually have different levels of fat,
right,
and other elements, and so that they're not completely the same. So a deer is expecting to get deer milk.
Yeah.
So unless you have deer milk in the refrigerator, the fawn is really put at disadvantage.
And during that time, what is the father doing? Is it just
the father's doing his own thing. He's doing his own thing, hanging out with his other bachelor buddies. and has no desire at that time of year to be hanging out with the females or the offspring. Sometimes you'll see them together in the same fields feeding and whatnot, but that's just because that's where the food is. But there's no social organization where the male stays with the female. The male will breed a number of females during a breeding season, and then he'll go on his way and do his own thing and then hang out with the boys the rest of the year.
So if you're driving and you see a male, a buck, do you make the assumption that there are other bucks in the area?
You could, or a lot of times you'll see bucks that are fairly solitary.
I think it depends a little bit on the age. Like younger bucks,
Yeah.
I see that for younger males together. And if you get a male that lives a long time, they tend to eventually become solitary.
Yeah, that
And
could be true.
Sort of observation.
It could also be that, as they get older, you have fewer older age class individuals, so there's just fewer individuals of that age class to hang out with.
And deer don't live very long.
Okay.
This always surprises people. It seems, usually smaller animals live shorter than larger animals. So that when you get to the size of a deer, you think, oh, they must live 20, 30 years. And I guess in captivity they can. But here in Westchester, if you see a deer that's 5 years old, you've seen an unusual deer.
Yeah, unless it's a female. Sometimes you'll see females that get older, but bucks, since they're typically targeted by hunters, they have a high mortality rate also because they get very stressed during the rut. So, a 5-year-old buck would be a good age buck, but on average, probably 2.5 years old is, an average aged adult male.
How about a female? What do you think of it?
Female, I've seen, working at check stations, I've seen females up to 10.5 years old and older, so I would argue that, especially where there's very little harvest on the female part of the population, that their average age is higher than the males.
Yeah. It's still not as long as most
it
people
would be
think.
in captivity.
It's a tough life being a deer, actually.
Yeah, it is a very tough life.
Well, how do you determine the age?
Tooth wear and replacement. There's certain teeth that get replaced at around 1.5 years old, and then looking at the wear after that point, looking at the wear of the premolars and the molars. So as an adult, they'll have 3 premolars and 3 molars. And when you look in a deer's mouth, on top, if you just look in the mouth that you can see when it opens its mouth, you'll see a few teeth incisors and whatnot in the front, but you won't see anything else. That's because the premolars and the molars are back further in the mouth. And there's 6 on top, 6 on the bottom, and the amount of wear that they have tells us how old it is. There's a typical pattern that they have that we can get an idea. Sometimes I think we think we're a little more accurate than we are when we age deer, but you can get a pretty good idea of how old a deer is by looking at its teeth. And the same thing with horses. That's why they came up with that phrase, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, because then you might see it's older than you wanted it to be.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good now.
Well, we have about a minute left. Fred, I just wanted a quick question. We'll try to get this into the next program. Is T-Town involved in any deer programs or a task force?
Well, I served on the Westchester County Deer Task Force, and maybe we'll talk about that in the next show. And at T-Town, we're just now investigating really what we should do to help manage our own deer on our preserve better. We did a study this spring, and we found that there's 70 deer per square mile, we estimate, at T-Town. And ecologically, to have ecological health, you probably would want to have it closer to maybe 15.
Yeah, 15 to 20 in most forested
so,
environments.
So really, we have at least 3 times too many deer for ecological health, and we're seeing the forest at T-Town and throughout Westchester degrading because of a number of factors, and one factor that's very important is the deer are overabundant. So an important issue.
Yeah.
All right. I think we have about, I think we have to close up because we're running out of time here. So I'd like to thank my guests, Dr. Fred Kuntz, the Executive Director of T-Town Lake Reservation, Kevin Clark, Region 3, DEC Wildlife Biologist, and James Waterhouse, who's the Animal Control Officer at the town of Yorktown. This is part 1 of Living with Deer in Yorktown. I'd like to thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for watching 30 Minutes. I'm your host, Daniel Lefkowitz, and have a good night.